3 million years from Earth, the mining ship Red Dwarf. Its crew, Dave Lister, the last human being alive, Arnold Rimmer, a hologram of his dead bunkmate, and a creature who evolved from the ship's cat. Message ends. Additional. Our biggest enemy is going space crazy through loneliness. The only thing that helps me maintain my slender grip on reality is the friendship I share with my collection of singing potatoes. What's up, Smegheads, and welcome to Series 2 of Thanks for the Memory, a Red Dwarf podcast where we are rewatching every episode of the BBC comedy show Red Dwarf and discussing them. I am Lee, and with me is Blake.
That's right, and today we are going to talk Series 2, Episode 5, Queeg. This episode originally aired on October 4th, 1988, and I bring this up in so many of the pods. Again, grown up rural North Carolina, not exposed to a ton of like what's across the pond, and I come across this show on my local PBS channel as like a 10-year-old or whatever, and this particular intro, when it played on my rewatch here for the first time, I had forgotten which episode started with my batch of singing potatoes. That one was burned in my brain. I remember going back to my school as a kid and being like, I just found the funniest there's this really funny show, and trying to explain the intro, my batch of singing potatoes, and just people, you know,
yeah, what are
trying
you
to do my
about?
best accent, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" But I roared laughing when he said that, and my wife's like, "What is going on?" I'm like, "Oh my god, that was like when you go home and have a nice home cooked meal from like where you grew up or whatever, and you're like, oh man, this just feels so nice right now." That gag, that joke, just warmed my heart, and I will tell you, and I think you are going to say the same, that it will be a theme for this entire episode.
It's nice to start an episode of this show with not explaining to you some Britishism that you don't understand for a change as well. Although there is one. I think there is one.
Have one, and then I wrote down one that some Americans may not get, but because, and we'll get to that, I absolutely understood. I can't wait to talk about that.
I had to look up something in this later on. I was like, I don't is it the next one? I'm confused. Oh no, it is this one. We'll get there, I'm sure.
Yeah, I did have a question. Maybe one question. It might be the one that you were looking up. So the synopsis. What the heck happened in the show that if we were doing a video podcast, you would see that the both of us are grinning ear to ear like idiots. Like even watching this we both discovered prior to recording, we've both watched this 3 times in our rewatch. And again, if you're joining us relatively new, for the most part, we have not watched these episodes in a long time. And for me, especially this series 2, like, yeah. And this just tickled me the whole time. So what happens in this episode? In this episode, Red Dwarf's backup computer, Queeg 500, takes command of Red Dwarf when Holly allows a meteorite to damage the ship and Rimmer to malfunction. The crew encourages Holly to challenge Queeg to a game of chess. Oh, actually, it's just to a game. I don't know if they encourage him to the game of chess.
No, they don't.
Where the loser gets erased from the system. That is the most sort of in a nutshell synopsis for this episode, and it doesn't do it justice at all. This episode is so good. The one thing I'll say where it does it justice is that quick synopsis covers the entire thing.
It does.
Where sometimes that's not the case. Like we've talked in previous episodes where, it's almost kind of like 2 things are going on. And,
true.
And in this episode, this is, and I've said this in previous ones, like, oh man, this is getting tight. Like the shows or episodes are getting tighter. This one, man, just like it's honed in to what this show is. Like when I think of Red Dwarf, this kind of an episode and this kind of comedy and this constant, because it's like a barrage. Like you are just giggling and laughing the whole time through this episode. But it's so rooted in the reality of the world these characters are in.
100%.
I wrote down somewhere, it was about a joke that feels like a one-off joke, but it isn't. It's earned. It's from the characters. It's from their history. And this is an episode where I don't think there's a single, we are doing a thing right here just to be funny. Obviously, they're trying to be funny. Yeah. But I mean, Like when the cat would not really be in an episode, but show up to just do a thing, a gag, and then disappear, right?
Yes.
There's none of that. Everything is... I'm going to shut up because I can
No,
keep
it's
going.
true. It is.
It's so much.
It's funny as well, isn't it? Because we've talked about a lot from series 1 where they were all apart from the last 2, kind of standalone episodes, and this feels like another one of these. This episode could have quite comfortably been in series 1 and not felt out of place at all. It's very much that I've said about Red Dwarf, especially the early ones before they got a budget, that it was very much about the writing. And they weren't trying to tell a long-form story. Each episode kind of stood on its own, but it was building on... I think you've said it before. You kind of just said it there. We're building on the characters rather than the story. And this feels like that again, where we've learned enough about the characters that this is everything you expect from those characters perfectly.
And I didn't realize... until the rewatch we're doing, so many of the plots of all the previous episodes deal with the origin of the characters. Like Kachansky keeps coming back, or the desire, it takes into this, we kind of find out there's some weird things with Rimmer's family, but that becomes like an ongoing thing, history with his family. We've done the stories where you find the last cat person besides Cat who's alive on the ship and stuff. And it all is sort of has laid the groundwork. And you almost forget, like, we're only on the 11th episode of these, right? But so much lore has been established. I don't know what I'd really change in the previous episodes to go. I wish they could all be like Queeg, but the work they did sets up this.
Yes.
And to me, this is probably the turning point where the show just... There will be other turning points, but as far as like just taking off in a trajectory of what I love about Red Dwarf, like from here on, it's on a Holly Hop drive. We'll get to that later. Speeding through time and space now, instead of fits and starts. I guess that's kind of how the first, like, in retrospect, feel like we talk about how, this moment was so cool because it's like what will come out of the series. And this particular episode, it's it's perfect, the whole thing.
But it's very small again. It's a very small, like Thanks for the Memory, it's a very small episode. It's not really dealing with, we've talked about Red Dwarf where they're not scared to deal with proper sci-fi tropes. This doesn't really. It's very much rooted into kind of what we said Red Dwarf isn't for the longest time, of just being it could have quite comfortably been a sitcom in space. And that's kind of what this episode is, but it doesn't feel like it's not a generic sitcom in space. It's like you said, it's very much, it's these characters that we've already got to know so well and using them to tell, I'm going to spoil it now, so far, my favorite episode we've watched this run through.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Like I know this episode, and I know that I like it, and I was so excited to get to it. But man, this first rewatch, it's so good. I just looked. I was like, it's perfect. It's so good. It's just everything stacks one on the other, and I think one thing that helps is, it is a contained sitcom-ish, but like I said, it's so rooted in the people. Yeah. Except we do get an additional bit of lore, quote unquote, from Holly and how the AI systems work, and we get a new character out of it. And I do think, especially leading into as we get to season 3, there is something magical about that having that one extra character.
Oh, yes.
In this mix. It does still feel like the one thing that's missing. And so when you have this Queeg character in the mix, the group plays, now that you've solidified this buddy system of Holly and Kat, Lister and Rimmer, it plays well when they have something else to react to, and they do it in different ways. And in time to come, some episodes become like a Monster of the Week where it's like them against a thing, and that's sort of the extra character or whatever, but they also get an additional character. And that I think helps because, well, it kind of you in this episode, you don't lose any of the like stuff that makes Lister nuts and Rimmer and all those things. Like you still get all that stuff, but it's not what the episode's about.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, even the opening scene feels like the typical scene with Rimmer playing. Wait, I want to make sure I didn't screw it up.
No,
this
right.
is the one Rimmer's playing chess, right?
With the scutty, yes.
With the scutters
and
in the beginning.
Kat's listening to the Robert, what's his face, reading Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So I have this issue. So he's like, "What are you listening to?" And he's like, "Oh," and he puts the headphones on. And they're like, "Oh, and it's the tape must have got all twisted, man." But so he says tape. The tape must have got all twisted. But when he holds up the thing to show him what he's listening to, it's a CD case.
Yeah.
And I was like,
which in 1988 would have been very high tech.
Yeah. But we mentioned tape and showed a CD case. And I'm like,
So that was a question I had. What is the reference to the album?
I have no idea. I think it was just like a random thing that it was obviously supposed to be.
Okay.
The guy reading the story, but it had got twisted and it just sounded cool now. I don't think there was any other joke there specifically other than that.
Gotcha. Well, I didn't. I was like, I wonder if there's a reference.
I don't think so.
I would know. But I love that whole scene. You know, that's silly. He's trying to play the Scudder and checkers, Rimmer is, and he's just stalling because the Scudder has to go to work in a minute and a half. That's how he's going to win, even though he's losing.
But that's Rimmer all over, isn't it? He would never do... It doesn't matter what it takes to get what he wants. He will do whatever it takes because that's just who he is.
Well, and it's funny because I know we keep dissecting like the human that is Rimmer. And it was funny on one of my like rewatches here where I was like, oh, you know, it's interesting that he's sitting there saying like, well, that's because I'll you know, I don't, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but like I'll look at the battlefield and all the options. Yeah. You know, I'll consider all the angles to win. And, you know, rule schmools almost, which is funny because he's also...
That's very true, yeah.
So angry when Lister... It should be by the rules,
He's all about doing by the book.
Except we will actually find out later in this episode that he says the book, but he actually doesn't want to do the book. But even the way, like, it just feels... They have... These kind of moments have almost happened, but there's something... Maybe this is where the magic starts for me. The way they're all hanging out does not feel like we are setting up for anything other than this is just a normal day. Yeah. And that is something that really leans into subsequent episodes and a lot of the other seasons where it's just, who knows how much time has passed. They're just... You know, it's just a normal moment. And even just a normal moment with them because of who they are is just funny. And it's like the gang, the boys from the dwarf, they're right there. And the entrance of Holly into this scene of like, what's happening, dudes? You know, is just, usually it's like an old Seinfeld episode or something where like, or a sitcom where the neighbor that everyone loves will walk through the door and the live studio audience, yeah, you know what I mean? It's like got that feeling to it. But he, I mean, it's such a good, you know, it's a great episode when one, you get the singing batch of potatoes and then Holly appears and is like, I was going to tell you something. And then forget what it was or whatever, the ship gets rocked.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. There's a meteor.
There's a meteorite we're going to hit.
One of the things I was going to bring up because it's a weird where this series sits because I've said to you before, some of the humor in it's quite slapsticky and quite childish. But then it deals with, so there's a joke here when he's like, and that Lister is why men are better than machines. And he's like, oh, well, I had a geography teacher and she took us to Deganwy for a weekend. And I heard a really strange noise coming from her tent. She didn't think men were better than machines. And you're like, okay, right. So I had to look it up because she said she took us to Deganwy. And I thought it was like, the Ganwy is the way it sounds like he says it. So I put the subtitles on because I'm like, I have no idea what he's just said. And it was Deganwy, Deganwy. And I thought that that's got to be a place in Wales. So I Google it and yeah, it's a town in Wales apparently, but I'd never heard of that place.
That's an amazing drop. You know, someone on the crew or writer is like from there
but probably,
or has family there
yes.
or something. It's too deep of a cut. It's like when I start talking about Darlow on our
no one knows who you're talking about.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, wait, how does this guy know that?
Yeah. But yeah, she didn't think men were better than machines. And you're like, whoa, he didn't specifically say it either. So it's quite a subtle joke. But it's like, it was quite an adult joke in a series that, as I say, can be quite childish at times.
But it is written in that way that, I mean, when I was a kid and discovered it, I had no
you wouldn't
idea.
have had a clue.
Yeah, right. It goes over that. But this episode just keeps them coming. Like, another great thing it does, the idea of the plot, like, you know, it hits the thing. You're like, you're worthless, Holly. And it's like, well, what's the damage? I don't know. Damage machine is damaged. Yeah. Like dip, 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 dip. Everything just kind of keeps stacking on the other. And it's such a, dramatic's not the right word, but like the drama of the episode builds like constantly. And I think that's where they hit such a sweet spot was we got the drama of what's happening and then layering in those jokes because of who the people are.
Yes.
Like, I love that, you know, remember like when he talks about how he's going to beat the Scudders by basically not cheating, but just he's going to wait till the Scudders program to have to go clean and then he has to forfeit the game.
Win by default.
Right, and win by default. And like, yeah, Lister does is like, God, you're just such a weasel. Like, you'll do it. You know, there's not a human bone in your body or whatever. And Rimmer jibes back at him, and Kat's being annoying to Rimmer with the singing, but it's not like a little of the puerile, I'm trying to just drive you crazy right now, has disappeared. And it feels like we are stepping into a story that's 5 months from the last episode.
Yes.
Because it feels like this is normal life now.
Yeah, they've got past that point of just trying to piss each other off all the time of like, oh, well, I guess we've got to get on some of the time. Yeah.
And also kind of like the idea of, you know, maybe with the time, with the Stasis Leak episode, the idea of trying to get back, and it kind of goes away, and it's more like, well, I guess this is life now.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? And you know, we're just hanging out. And I think that's another thing that, you know, probably in retrospect, you know, you do it and you see the reaction to the episode, and you go back and go, especially when you're at the end. And so when you're looking ahead to your next series, you're like, there's something to how this is put together that I think really, really sticks through. And I love that it takes a bit to meet our other character that's going to come in. Like, they go in to go see what the damage is, and they do that. I think this is the same set that was the dream thing where you could put the memories. Yeah. It's just got a couple of different scenic pieces in there, but Rimmer all messing up.
My favorite scene. Well, the shuttle was late, you see, and they're usually so good, aren't they? And then he starts doing Lister and Holly, doesn't he? Disconnect the chart relay. It's like, disconnect the chart relay. But how'd you do that, Hol? How'd you do that, Hol? It's like having an absolute blast. So this is where I was chatting with one of our listeners today, and it all made sense. And he was like, but hang on. So he does, I can't remember who he is, the guy's the ship psychiatrist. And then he does Holly, and then he does Lister. And then he does Kat. And I'll call you out, Darren Satchel, friend of ours, listener, loving what we're doing, by the way. So why would Kat be in his database? Because the whole point of it is that the hologram simulation suite, and he would have had to, the whole point is that it's obviously cycling through the files of the ship's crew that are saved in the hologram simulation suite. Why would Kat be in there?
So, you know, it's funny. I treated it as, in my brain, it was two different things. Like, at first he was doing the ship psychiatrist, and that's what Rimmer was, well, you know, Chris Berry was like imitating or whatever. The shuttles are so, I kind of love that moment so much. But I think when it came to the next ones, because he was repeating what they were saying, I just took it as he was glitching and repeating what they were saying. Because in the other one, if he was acting like the psychiatrist, this one just, I just took it like a,
he's
like the way he repeated after the moment with his genitals go walking off without him or whatever, and he has the like he hiccups and repeats himself right before he does the psychiatrist.
Yeah, that bit.
Yeah,
but he's not copying Kat, because Kat doesn't do anything. So he's copying Holly and he's copying Lister, but then he just starts doing, ow! And he's like, oh, no, he's me. But Cat doesn't do that, so he's not copying Cat. It's a strange thing.
Do you think Holly could be recording Cat?
I think Chris Barry was just having far too much fun.
Sure.
And like, I want to do all of them now.
I mean, they're just trying to be fun, but yeah. I could argue lore-wise that Holly's been now downloading the Cat stuff so that if anything ever happens to him, then he can also bring back the Cat or whatever, do a rotation.
Possibly.
Which that'd be a whole other like funny thing to see in the first. But that's interesting. That's an interesting call out.
Yeah, I never thought about it.
I love when we get those. Usually we're the ones throwing those out. So we're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. So
you can do what with it? This technology? We'll get to that in the next episode too. There's some odd technology. I do have a Britishism that I want to point out. I remember the first time I heard it, didn't even know what it meant. And it is the way that Chris Barry says, as we say in the States, condom. When he says you're as useful or you get as much use as a condom machine in the Vatican.
Right.
But he's condom? That's what it sounds like?
It's just because, so the big difference between Americans and English is you over accentuate certain vowels that we don't. Yeah. So it's just the way, so I would say Monty Python and you guys would say Monty Python. You over enunciate certain vowels that we don't, like marathon. And we would just marathon. Say it's just a flat. We would just say marathon. It's all flat vowels right the way through. Whereas it's that whole soundbite thing, isn't it? That you're putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's where it comes from.
And like marathon, and there's so many that they roll right through my head. I'm like, yeah, that's just how they say it. But condom has always sounded that at any show I've ever seen, it ticks in my ear because it sounds almost like a different word to me when I hear it that way.
To be fair, back in the late 80s, as a rule, we wouldn't have called them condoms either. If you were in the schoolyard, it would be called a rubber johnny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there's no way we'd have ever called it a condom at that point.
Although I think it's perfect that Rimmer does.
Yes.
But I was like, oh, there's one. I haven't come across one in the episodes yet where I'm like, oh yeah, that's one of those that like just strikes my ear is weird because it doesn't even sound British to me. It just sounds completely weird when I hear it. And it's odd because it's such a short, it's only a 2-syllable word. So it's odd that it hits on my ear so hard. I think so. Does this get? I'm trying not. I took less notes. Full disclosure, because I was just enjoying it so much, even on my third watch.
I mean, I haven't got too many notes, but obviously this is where we meet Queeg, and I love it. So this is what I was going to say. You say,
but Lister gets his awesome stunt moment. There's a rare stunt in Red Dwarf when he gets fried because Holly's like, "Oh, I put the red and the white one." Oh wait, what should have been the other way around?
Yeah.
He blows up and there's like a dive roll and I think a stunt performer with a big explosion. You're like, hey man,
in slow-mo as well. In slow-mo as well, just to get the money's worth out of it as well. Yeah,
absolutely.
But yeah, then see, that's what I was going to say as well. You say it's quite a long time in that we meet Queeg, and it is, but it isn't. But then it also goes, I think the setup for it's quite quick, but it goes off the back of what we were saying earlier, is that we know these characters so well now. So you know what a mess Holly is. You know he's a dickhead and he's probably the worst computer that any ship would ever want. So when they don't do too much at the beginning of this episode to drill that home, because they don't need to, because the groundwork for it's been done already in the previous like 11 or 10 episodes.
I just love that. Well, even like, the joke is coming as he goes to connect the cables, and that Holly's going to say, oh, wait, it was the other way around. I mean, it's coming because, as you said, Holly. Yeah. And it's still so funny. And poor Lister, it points out, Cat won't work. Rimmer can't touch things. And they don't talk about it, but when you're watching the moment, you realize, like, yeah, on this ship, Lister comes across as a slob, but he actually does a ton of crap because the other guys can't or won't.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I'm a cat. Cats don't work. Not this pussy.
Need my naps.
Yeah. My favorite line in the entire episode, probably my favorite line in any episode leading up to this, is the one about him having an IQ of 6,000. And it's like, he doesn't have an IQ of 6,000. Well, what is it then? It has a 6 in it, but it's not 6,000. What is it? 6. And it makes me laugh so hard because you know it's coming every time. Even though I've watched it, I literally watched that episode. I watched it once on Monday and then twice yesterday, and it still made me laugh every time.
Just the appearance of Queeg is like, I felt like even the way he's doing it, if you did it today, you'd be like, oh, they're copying Samuel L. Jackson. Except he wasn't really a thing then. Do you know what I mean? Like, even his like sucker, like it's got that vibe to it. I'm like, wait, when is this 88? Okay, like, yeah, I mean, Samuel's, he's doing stuff, but he's not known. Not
like he is now, yeah.
Yeah, like now, now you would think that's what this moment is, right? They're like, oh, they got a guy to kind of be like a Samuel Jackson type, the way he delivers lines and stuff. I do believe the 6 in it leads to my favorite line that would be a Britishism that some may have to ask translation for. Is that right? Where Holly says, "That's a load of Tottenham." That is.
Oh yes,
a steaming pile of Hotspur.
That when that joke happened, I immediately thought of you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, full disclosure, I'm a member of a podcast called The Brutal Game, and this is the official crossover episode.
Yes.
Because when that happened, I decided, well, I'm going to bring my Arsenal koozie down here and crack a delicious Oktoberfest from the Sierra Nevada Brewing Company in both North Carolina, my home state, and California, brewed in conjunction with an awesome brewery over in Germany called the Gutmann Brewery as a bit of a collaboration beer. And I have been waiting to do this crossover as soon as I heard that line delivered. Because if you are unaware, American listeners, I love Arsenal, love the English Premier League, and the rivals, which the game is this weekend. And boy, we got a lot of injuries coming up. Tottenham Hotspurs are the rival. And like what's the chant? What is Tottenham? What is Tottenham? And I was rolling at this because I hadn't seen these in a while and I had no idea, because at the time of seeing this, I had no clue I wouldn't even tell you what English Premier League was, let alone have sat down and watched a soccer match, as we say over here. And I was rolling. And and it carries over because there's another reference in the next episode. So as we get 2.
Is there?
Yeah, there is. It makes me very happy.
Okay.
So I'm just assuming, was there an Arsenal fan on the writing somewhere?
I mean, it seems that way, doesn't it? And it's funny that how much you still, like on the Brutal Game, how much you guys absolutely still slam Tottenham as being absolute garbage. And we're going back like 30 years and they were still crap.
I'm like 1988, still funny. Well, I even made the joke because we just got Mauricio Pochettino, with his turn to a soccer podcast now, is now who was the head coach of Arsenal for Tottenham for a while, is now the head coach of the men's national team for America.
Okay, I did not know that.
I said, we're going to get so good so fast and still win no trophies.
Yeah.
So, that was so this joke got me. That's a load of Tottenham, that is. A steaming pile of Hotspur. And I was like, I need to add that to my lexicon to roll out.
So that leads me into something I noticed in this episode, and it's very much a low budget Red Dwarf thing. So Holly's trundling along in his little TV on his like motorized thing, and I noticed the channel on the TV is 00, the channel you would have to play a video on. So it's quite obvious that they've got it set on that channel because they're either broadcasting live to that TV or they've got a video cassette playing his parts, and they didn't even bother to disguise that the channel that it was on was like the video channel, like the AV channel.
I think when he's on the TV like that rolling in, I think it's a recording.
Yeah.
And then when it's on the big screen, like Queeg is, and you get the close-up shots, I think they're doing it live on set. I think with the audience, just because there are still a couple of moments of like holding for laughs and whatever.
Yes.
And it stands out because one time he's on the TV screen and they hold for a laugh. He holds for a laugh,
but it doesn't,
because they thought they might get one.
Right.
So there's like a little thing like, okay, I don't think that's live, but that's brilliant. And if I was making that today and having an old school TV rollout, you would intentionally be like, I'll put this on 00 so that it looks like Would that be going through the RCA cables in 88? How would that have worked in 88?
Just an auxiliary cable, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Oh, but this whole moment delights me so much. I mean, Queeg just comes out, like I said, Samuel Jackson style, with like his like delivery and how he's attacking Holly. And none of the guys really stick up for Holly at all.
Because that's one of my favourite lines later on as well. And he's like, no one stuck up for him. And Rimmer goes, I stuck up for him. And he goes, did you? And he goes, all right, then I didn't. That made me laugh every time as well. I'll tell you what, so this is, I can't remember whether it was, I think it was just after this bit. Because obviously we found out that he gets all his information from the Junior Book of Space, because it was the only book he could find with pictures in it, which is hilarious.
Yes.
But the story that Lister is telling Rimmer about Peterson buying the smart shoes, and I thought it was interesting that in 1988, when smart technology wasn't a thing, we used the word smart shoes.
I have a memory. I think we had it in the lexicon from movies about the military. Okay. Smart missiles, smart weapons. Okay. I feel, because I had the same thought, because I heard it and it didn't sound weird. And then I was like, wait a minute. On the second viewing, this is 88. And I think it wasn't in Top Gun, but like some kind of movies, I feel like that's where
maybe
it might, and I'd have to see, like, was it some term like, the military had for some weaponry, or like it was in a movie, and then sometimes those things cycle through and it just becomes, but I did notice that too. I also, to complete the Brutal Game crossover episode, love that this episode in the middle of it has a 1.5 minute dad joke by Lister about those smart shoes.
It's the fact that how clever Rimmer is sometimes, this is so dumb, because it's like, it turns out that shoes have soles, and he's like, oh, what a beautiful story. Wait a minute, how did it open the car door? And you're just like, what?
It's such a long setup. Yeah, like what do they call it? It's such a long walk down a short pier to get there, and you are kind of like, it's Red Dwarf, it's the future, and you're just kind of listening to it. You're like, this is a funny, ridiculous story that is so dumb, but whatever. I guess it works in the sci-fi world. And then the punchline of like, oh my God, I feel dumb for not realizing this is all just a setup, because of the world I was buying into it. There's a real story about Peterson and his shoes that would walk everywhere. I love that. He tried to give away and they'd come down and kick the door in.
And they robbed a car and drove into the lake. Couldn't steer, you see.
Yeah. Couldn't steer, you see. Just so good. But that's the thing. Like, all this stuff has just happened where, Queeg has told Holly, like, you're done, man. You can't. You've hurt the crew. You've endangered them. You're demoted. I'm running the ship.
Yeah.
And like, we've now moved to, like, I don't know. I guess it's the next day or whatever. A few hours later, what have you. How is life now with Queeg? And here these guys are hanging out and they're doing these dumb jokes, and it still feels so real. Like, these guys really do. It's a hard thing to pull off, but somehow you're like, okay, something evolved from the ship's cat, a dead guy that's a hologram, and this dude who's the last human alive after 3 million years. I absolutely believe they all exist together because of those moments and how well. And it's just joke, but it doesn't feel like a bad sitcom where you're like, whoa, take a breath, man. Like, where they feel like they're throwing out 100 jokes to see if 2 will hit. These just feel so good and natural. Bam, bam, like one after the other. Like, Lister feels bad. And it's that thing that Lister's always the slob with the heart of gold, and that he's so worried about Holly. Yeah. And that he's got, but he's alive. Like, he's got feelings, right? And Rimmer's like, no, he's not. It's like that whole, like, it's no different than, the old blind and incontinent Labrador. Take it out back, 2 barrels.
That just shows again the difference between Rimmer and Lister.
Yeah. He's just so harsh, like, so fast. And Lister's so worried about Holly. And I love Rimmer's I am too. I was quite fond of him.
Yeah.
And it's so insincere.
It's like, so going back to something we've talked about a lot since we started covering all of these as well, that some episodes lean very heavily into the hologram thing and others don't. This one massively leans into the fact that Rimmer is a hologram. So you've had the bit where his legs go wandering off on their own, the whole bit with him imitating the crew, but then when Queeg first gets him up at like 6 a.m, and he's like, why are you getting me up at 6 a.m? Because that's what time we rise. It's like, oh, but me and Holly had this little thing. And again, though, it's weird because we had this little thing where I would say, wake me up at 6. He'd say, okay, and then wake me up at 7 with breakfast. Why does a hologram need to have breakfast? But anyway,
no, not 7. There's not 6. He'd say he would pretend to forget and wake me up half past 10 with breakfast.
Yes. And then the fact that it's like, no, it's workouts first. So he starts doing like squat thrusts and stuff like that, but he won't do it, so Queeg takes over his body and then he sends him out on a 3-mile run and he passes out after the first half mile and does 2.5 miles passed out. And I don't know what Chris Barry did, but he actually looks like he's worked out because his hair's brushed forward like it is and he's all sweaty, so he's obviously done some sort of workout because he doesn't look like someone's just splashed a bit of water over his head to make it look like he's sweaty. He looks sweaty.
Well, he's down there doing like the sit-ups and stuff, but that run he does where he faints in the middle of the run and his head just goes slack, his physicality for humor is so good. It cracks me up every time. He fainted after the first 500 yards or whatever.
So you made him run 2.5 miles unconscious, yeah. And then Kat trying to get food out of the machine. It's like, there's no food. And it's like, I love his Queeg impression. It's like, sorry, you are out of credits.
Well, and that idea, I love that idea that, you're out here, I am the company.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to keep you in shape. Oh, the rules are, if you don't have credits to buy food, then sorry, you got to work to get credits.
But
man.
then Lister says the same thing, doesn't he? He's like, oh, well, me and Holly had this little thing going on where, like, no. And they're scrubbing the floor.
And I love that, at first I thought, well, Kat's just not going to get food because he's not a crew member. And then it's like, no, you got to go to work. Both of you go to work. And them out there like scrubbing the floor and cleaning it, and his Kat complaining his hands look terrible. Why don't you wear gloves? What? Marigold with blue? Are you crazy? Man, I look like you. What's his line?
I look like you in your best clothes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, instead of just bringing in the Kat to do a funny thing like that where, oh, isn't it funny? Cats like the way they look or they are always preening. It's part of the story, and that's why those jokes hit so much better for Kat now that he's really part of the crew.
He is, exactly. That's what I was going to say. We've commented that that first series and then probably a couple of this one where he did just drop in and out like a cat would. He very much feels like part of the crew now.
Yeah, he's one of the gang. And this bit leads to one of my favorite scenes. I just love Holly rolling up as if he's doing the night watchman.
With his flat
he's got
cap
the little,
on.
A little flat cap, and he's got the scarf or whatever. Which has one of my favorite things, him talking about, or one of my favorite deliveries of it, that he's smart, that he can do it. And, Lister's like, you don't have to prove it to me, but I want to. I want to prove to you how smart I am. All right, then.
What's the square root of 2049? It's like, oh, so you want me to prove it then?
Yeah, his delivery. Oh, so you want me to prove it, do you? It's just so good. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It's like, you don't want a space question. What about a sports question?
Yeah, what about sports? And then when he finally does a space question, even though Holly has no hands, and so you don't see them, but you see the little junior space encyclopedia, whatever, pull up into frame, as he's like,
but then he still pauses before he answers it.
Yeah,
he's
the
like,
closest planet to the sun,
Mercury. Both of them have any clue whether the answer's right or not.
That's right. Well, you see, Lister's just like, that's right, Hall. As of now, he's like, oh no, I'm talking to a brain-addled relative. Now, I mean, that's kind of the vibe he's got, and how he wants, to prove himself. Does he reveal his plan there? Just that he wants to challenge him.
I think he obviously, knowing how the episode ends, he's trying to get them to have faith in him to push him to go and challenge Queeg.
Yeah, you all. I loved knowing that it wasn't so bad when O'Hall was running things.
Yeah.
Huh? Like even Cat being like, "How you doing, buddy? Let me clean your screen for you." Which is like huge. Like you've never seen Cat do anything for anybody, like in any of these.
And it's like, oh, this night watchman lark keeps me going. You know, I shine my light down the corridor and turn it off, and then back on again.
One of my favorite lines, also or deliveries, I should say, comes out after the scene where we're back in Lister and Rimmer's room, and he's like, oh, he's on the smeg, and he's like, he's giving me toast and a pea. And when he goes to cut that pea and that pea goes flying, I've lost me pea.
Oh, that's my pea. I earned that pea, and I'm going to eat it no matter what. Yeah. And it's like, I think it went over there in your boxes, in your socks. It's like, I'll just eat the toast then.
God, it's like, but again, that's such a like, hey, this guy's a slob. We have a funny joke, and those have been funny before. Like, but like because it comes out of what's happening right now, it's so good. And he genuinely sounds like, I worked really hard on this. Like, I don't care if it's terrible. It's mine.
Yes, I earned it, and I am going to eat it no matter what. It's funny, I've got in the trivia there that Norman Lovett, unsurprising to no one, said this was his favourite episode, and that isn't a surprise. And it's funny because he's not actually in it that much, but obviously because it revolves around Holly.
I wrote I have a funny note that's I didn't intend it when I wrote it this way to myself. So tight! ! It says, saying, because I was thinking, God, this episode's just so tight, which I've already said. But the following is another line in this, where, again, it's a funny bit about Rimmer's like sad life or whatever, but it comes out of the story that's happening where they're talking about, how bad things were. And, this is where Rimmer's talking about like, I don't have friends, so I shouldn't have friends. I had one friend, and Bucky Roebuck, or what was his name?
Porky Roebuck.
Porky Roebuck. God, what a great name. And he's like, we went on a scouting trip, and the kids decided they were going to eat me a few hours into it. And
oh, well, there you go. So I've got to jump in. There's the Britishism I was waiting for you to bring up, where we went out on an outward bound thing where we had to live off rainwater and anything we killed. And Lister says, oh, you went to Butlins. Do you have any idea what Butlins is?
I do not. I totally missed that. I remember that line now. I should have written that down.
So I don't know whether you guys have an equivalent in the US. Butlins it's a holiday camp. So it's like, how to explain it? Because I don't think in America you have anything kind of like it. It will be, so it's not a theme park, but imagine a theme park that's full of, it'll either be static caravans or like, chalets. Do you know what a chalet is? Yeah. So like that, and then they'll generally have like a swimming pool and activities and stuff for people to do. There'll be a big clubhouse with a bar, and there'll be entertainment on. We have it's still a thing now, and they'll have like some of the so there's a group that won Britain's Got Talent years ago. They do the rounds at Butlins. So it's a holiday camp that, back when I was a kid, that's what you did because people couldn't afford to go abroad. So you went to, there was Pontins, there was Butlins, and I think there was another one.
So that's the joke then, is that you have to kill what you eat what you killed. And like instead he's like, oh, you went to a curated camp.
Yeah, you went to Butlins, did you? Because it's like, because it's just what people could afford. Have you heard of Centre Parks?
Centre Parks? I haven't heard of that.
So we've got 2 or 3 over here. They're like these big dome enclosed holiday places. I thought if you'd have heard of that, it might be explaining. Look up Butlins. It's still a thing. There's still tons of them around the country. But I was like, I thought Blake's not going to have a clue what Butlins is.
Yeah, you're right. And you said it, and now I remember the line happening.
Yeah.
But I didn't write it down because there are so many good jokes and moments in this scene that it's just like bap, 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 bap. Leading to the one I said it was funny. The reason I wrote this is funny to see it written. No. You're fine because that was before this. But I wrote so tight, and then I wrote inflatable Ingrid.
Yes, your polythene pal.
Next to it, where he's like the only friend he's got is his inflatable love doll, which again is another like that's funny about. And this is where the writing's getting better. That's a funny bit. Of course, Rimmer is like one true love or friend that he could count on is this inflatable love doll, and then we get to the end of the story, or the scene, and Lister's like, I gotta let you know, I've been seeing inflatable. Oh, how did you know that bit? How did you know about Ingrid?
Yeah.
And he goes, I've been seeing inflatable Ingrid behind your back.
But he did that thing again, didn't he? He was like, do you know how many friends I've had? And Lister says, if you're including inflatable Ingrid, one, and he does that thing where he pulls his one finger up, doesn't he? And then goes, none at all. Yeah. Because he doesn't want Lister to be correct.
Right. And it gets so quiet. By the way, how do you know about inflatable Ingrid?
I've been seeing it behind your back.
So good. And like every scene doesn't really have jokes that have a line and a punchline.
Yeah.
It's like a thing is established and we layer and layer and layer and bap, and there's the joke, because really other jokes have happened in between that final moment, you know, which, I mean, spoiler alert, I can't think of a show that has been an entire setup to a joke to end with it as this one, which we'll get there. But like even the whole writing premise of this episode, that it is basically all of it a long joke to one punchline, and then you break it down and you've got all these several like chunks of building to punchlines.
But I've said to you before, when we talked about an earlier episode, that I think when they wrote an earlier episode and a joke happens in that, let's talk, so Me Squared, the last episode of series 1, there's a whole conversation where it's like, oh, there's 2 Federation fighters tracking the ship. Apparently you left a light on, so it's Norweb that you own now like 98% of the Earth's wealth because you left a light on, and then something about a sausage took over, and he does April Fool. And I was like, they must have thought that was a good idea. I wonder.
That was a good idea.
And then moving forward, we can get a whole episode out of that premise.
Well, it's so to set that up, we get the final confrontation between Holly and Queeg, where there's some rule. You know what? I forgot. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning because I was so excited about that's a load of Tottenham. That is a steaming pile of Hotspur. My other favorite Holly thing I should have mentioned in that scene was Queeg. That's treason, that is. I'll have you swing from the high. What if he does the nautical term?
And that goes off the second piece of trivia. That makes sense now. So the other piece of trivia is Queeg, the computer who mutinies and takes control of the ship, has the same name as the captain from the Kane Mutiny, 1954. I don't know what the Kane Mutiny is, whether it's a book or a film or whatever. But then that reference kind of is a little nod to his name being Queeg. And I've never caught that before until you mentioned that there and put 2 and 2 together.
You'll hang from the yardarm, you will. I'm afraid it's so good. But Holly goes in to challenge him. I love he gets, what's the song they play where he's clear he's going to go face Queeg?
Oh, it's like, I can't remember, but it's like a westerny, like a western, like a good, the bad and the ugly kind of showdown.
Yeah, but like an episode of old TV as opposed to a movie like where some
like
guy's now going to go out and like face the bad guy or whatever. And and Holly nails these kinds of deliveries to the entire episode. He's always good at these, but this episode's full of them. Of like, I challenge you to a game: chess, checkers, chess, tic tac toe, checkers, bit of shoots and ladders, checker, and like they just keep going and keep going. So you like a bit of chess, do you?
It's when he says Subbuteo, and this brings up Darren, the guy I was talking to again. How was Holly ever going to play Subbuteo, by the way?
Oh, that's true. Like all the stuff that he throws out.
Subbuteo.
Bish, or what is it? To Horsey to Bish 3.
That's my best. Horsey to King Prawn 3. I love that. King Prawn. And he doubled down on it all the way through, and it made me laugh every time he says it.
It's so good. And then I remember as a kid, like seeing this episode, and you're like, okay, something's going to happen, and he's going to win. And then he doesn't. And it's like, oh, what have you done? He's lost. And I love the moment before he's lost, where even Kat tries to help. Hey man, I think I've noticed something. Yeah. And this is a thing that will be a Kat joke type style, whatever you want to call it, that starts to carry through other things, especially when we get our 4th boy or 5th boy from the dwarf that joins the crew, where stuff like him going, hey man, I've noticed something. Every time you move, he moves. Yeah. It's like, and then Holly genuinely is like, thanks, Kat. because like, again, Cat doesn't do things for people.
No.
And he cleaned his screen and he's on. So like 2 things in a row now, he's like done for him.
I like it. He goes, castle to queen 6 or whatever it is, check. And he goes, queens don't move that way. And he's like, oh, that's right. I was thinking about poker.
It's so good. And the guy playing Queeg is so good.
Yes, he is.
And he will play into next episode as well. I think, you may have, do you know that?
No.
Oh, excellent. Great. I love that this episode gave us a 1-2 punch of things with Queeg to talk about.
Interesting. But speaking of him, I don't know whether... So I've brought this up before. I think I told you about Danny John Jules being part of a Labyrinth.
Yes.
Well, so was the guy who played Queeg, Charles Organs, who played him.
Yeah, who was he? I saw that.
So they previously worked together on Labyrinth, where they both voiced Fireys. Like the weird fiery things that take the heads off. And she takes the heads off and kicks them around. So there were both voices for those 2 characters, and that's cool. I love Labyrinth so much.
Labyrinth is so good. That's the worst looking spot, though. The blue screen is really janky.
It is really bad. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Which is funny. It's guys from Red Dwarf doing that because that's a typical thing for a Red Dwarf as well. Once the actual end happens, though, and he is lost, the show gets so legitimately sad.
Yes.
And somber. And you actually have an episode, or you have a trivia thing that I didn't even realize. This is the final episode for this series, or series 2, to feature the opening sequence of Lister painting the hull, which is accompanied by a somber rendition of the theme tune. So, and the last one to feature is Holly's opening monologue, explaining the premise of the show with a joke afterwards. So we're going to have to come up with a whole new intro to our show.
Yeah, well, we haven't got one for the next one. It's interesting, actually. A listener posted on our Facebook page about, we talked about, I think when Craig sent his email in the other episode, that apparently in a commentary track on the DVD, Lister's actually, Craig Charles confirmed that is Lister painting the ship, and that it was actually him in the suit.
I feel like I can kind of tell that on the higher definition upscaling a little bit. It's a little easier it looks like. But yeah. It does look like it's his profile.
Spoilers, I did think about us doing the whole musical number for the intro to the next episode, but I'll be honest, I did not have the time to put it together.
I won't lie, I thought about getting my guitar out and recording a version of it and sending it to you to play or something.
That would have been awesome.
I don't know.
Yeah. If I'd have had more time, it would have happened. But spoilers for next episode, guys. It won't be. We won't be starting with Tongue Tied.
No, apologies. Blake's busy working on Halloween things at a park and did not leave its time that I wanted.
But trust me, I really wanted it to happen.
But the actual ending of like him saying goodbye to everybody is so good and so heartfelt. Like Lister saying, or him saying to Lister, hey, goodbye. I hope you go down to the disco. I love that. You think it wasn't so bad being with Hall, lift a pint. But he tells Lister, I hope things work out for you and Kachansky, which is like ridiculous.
Yes.
Like we have established, okay, this for real now is never going to happen. And he says it in a way that's so genuine. And like, hey, I hope this works out for you. And to Rimmer's like, I hope you, meet those aliens you want and you get a body and you find a woman and all those things you think that'll make you happy.
Yes.
Which I'm like, dang, that's such a like psychological backhanded, I love you, so I'm going to tell you something honest right now. And Kat, I hope you get your,
get your end away.
Get your end away. That's right. I was like, that's a good one.
That's a very British term. And
Kat's response is so genuine as well. When he's like, thanks, man, or thanks, buddy. Well, I forget the exact line, but this moment is so real. And you're like, wow. And then he's like, well, as they say, end it with a song.
I can't even, I think what the song is. When he started, and it's obviously like, brrr.
But he starts singing it, and it's like, oh, it's funny again. And then to the erased, and you're like, this sucks. Like, I really like him. And Queeg popping up.
He's like, I've got one thing to say to you guys. What's happening, dudes? And they're like, what's going on?
But with Holly's voice. Yeah. What's happening, dudes? Yeah. Here we go. And what's happening, dudes? And then it's dead quiet for my favorite line that's been written in the English language. Sorry, Shakespeare. We are talking Jape of the Decade. We are talking April, May, June, July, and August Fools. Like, and it's so flat the way he delivers it. There's no like, got ya.
Yes.
It's so like it's so understated in such a beautiful way, which is so Norman Lovett's vibe.
Yes.
I mean, that's why you want to hire him something, right? He's so good at that. But the computer, especially for an episode where Lister's been like, but he's got a soul, right? Doesn't he? Like there's something to him. And Rimmer's like, no, he's a machine. But like, he's so proud of himself right here. Oh, I was gonna say, and the most heart-tugging thing before he quote unquote is erased is the whole, he gives the answer to what's the square root of 2004.
Yeah.
And he's like, I might be slow, but I get there in the end. And you're like, oh man.
See, this leads me into something I wrote down. So it's another episode, like I said, that they could have put it anywhere and it wouldn't have made too much of a difference. I know I've kind of said that putting it where it is, that groundwork of knowing that Holly's a up. So they don't need to do too much setup in this episode because you already know that he's a computer as it is. But I would have preferred them to have put this episode as the last episode of this series. Right? So go with me. If this was episode 6, the last episode of this series, I believe that people watch it, and maybe this is just because we're so used to this type of thing now, and it maybe wasn't such a thing back then. But if you'd have put this as the last episode of the series, maybe that jeopardy of Holly getting a raise would have been even bigger because it's the last episode of the series. And then, so it's weird that they do it at episode 5. So you think, surely not at episode 5. There's still another episode to go, so surely they're not going to. Whereas if you do it at the last episode of the series, well, maybe they will get rid of him.
Well, so that did work. That's another reason this episode's burned in my brain is that did work on me as a kid because I didn't know the structure of how British shows worked. And 6 episodes, as we've talked about earlier for me, was not something I was used to. I was used to 23 episodes was like your minimum or whatever, for a sitcom. So as a kid, especially because the way this aired on PBS, like you would be watching something like Blake 7, throw that out there for you, was on. And I was, of course, it had the name Blake. So I was like, what is this? Oh my God, it's sci-fi. And I saw like an episode or 2, but because of how sporadically they do certain things, you never knew. So when I tell you that watching series 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I guess 6, we'll go through 6, was a combination of, again, this is pre-internet, y'all. I didn't know. So every Friday at 11:30, when I would sit in my room and go to the UHF side of my dial and go click, 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 and turn the dial to channel 36 for PBS, I would wait to see, one, if it's Red Dwarf again and it's a rerun and I don't care, I'll watch it. Or is it going to come on at all and they're not going to do it anymore? Because we just wouldn't know. It would just stop, right? So when I saw this, not a clue that there's another episode next week.
That's maybe a good point, yeah.
Right, it feels a crapshoot. So it is interesting to hear you say that because I will agree with you and say, I do think it would hit hard because I didn't know. There were no advertisements like watch Red Dwarf at 11:30. That's not how PBS would work. It's public access television, and I know you guys have BBC, and they're kind of cousins in some ways the way they work, but they're also very different. And they don't really do the advertisements. If you weren't getting TV Guide, as it was in the States back then, as a magazine form to know what was going to be on.
Yes.
You didn't know. But also because each PBS station was local, nationally PBS might be going, hey, we got the rights to do Red Dwarf we do it on Friday nights at 11:30. But your local channel could be like, well, except for this one here, what we do is we do a local thing that happens.
Yeah.
So you just never knew. So for me, it was mortifying.
Because you didn't know.
I thought Holly was gone. That's really cool that you brought that up because I completely forgot about that memory.
Yeah, I mean,
like that of feeling that way with it.
Because you look back, like now when a series comes out, how many episodes it's going to have.
Yeah.
Because if you're watching it on Netflix or you're watching it wherever, it'll generally, 2 of 10 or whatever. Whatever series you go into now, you know how many episodes. And I'm trying to think back now to those days of whether you would have known how many episodes there were in each series. So yeah, as I said, maybe it is just a thing of looking it through the lens of 2024, and it probably is, to be honest.
Right. And of course, like, the show is so new and they don't seem... The premise has been the same, but it also feels like something could change at any minute. That, hey, maybe this actor could only do through episode 5 because something's come up, and this guy's going to take over for the next. And also, sure, why not? He's totally different. This will be a new dynamic. Oh, this is what the show's going to be now.
Yeah.
Them against Queeg. There's no reason to think this isn't going to happen.
I mean, there's nothing to say back in the day that you could watch series 1 and series 2 back to back and not necessarily know that it's only really the intro is different between series 1 and series 2. So you could potentially watch the first 12 episodes and not realize that it wasn't all the same series.
And to be honest, that's probably how my memory of 1 and 2 works. And it's why I don't have a good memory of them back to back. You could, other than the first episode, have mixed these up a lot for me.
Yes.
And that's kind of my memory of watching them. And the way they were played, they were a few months off from each other. And I could have walked into reruns, right?
Yeah.
Of the initial series 1, and then this is playing.
So in all likelihood, you probably didn't watch them in order.
Not in order until series 4.
Wow.
Everything was jumbled up in my... I don't have a memory of this to this to this to this.
Okay.
Which is why I was convinced there was an episode I was missing, and we'll talk about this from episode 6 of this series to series 3,
yes.
episode 1.
I've already had a listener reach out to us about that, of going, I'm just started series 3. What the hell?
And in my case, when I lived in Japan, and it was early 2000s and you had ways to download things. We'll just leave it at that. I finally started trying to watch them in order because I could get them in order,
Yeah.
Hey, but full disclosure, I've paid for all these so far through Apple TV. So just nobody come after me.
It's different for me because I own the VHSs.
Yeah.
So I'd have watched them on the TV when they were on, but then most of my viewing of these would have been through watching, I think I had series 1 and series 2 on VHS, so I would have watched them in order a lot.
I should have dragged the family VCR into my room and recorded these as a kid. That's absolutely what I should have done.
So weird though, isn't it, looking at a series this old through the lens of now? And the world is a very different place, especially when it comes to TV.
Well, and really realizing that, as we've been doing the show, oh yeah, I mean, you look at it, obviously the difference that I'm used to between American TV and British, but also just now, how you said, oh, this seems like a thing they shouldn't have done so quick because there was an April Fool's thing mentioned earlier, but they're not thinking about people watching these back to back.
No.
That was unheard of. But this punchline is so good, and their reaction to, you did all this, and then the episode just kind of ends, is amazing. No other punchline needed.
No.
Done. And the two things I love the most as an overarch are just, as we've already said, this is peak Red Dwarf. When anytime Red Dwarf is peaking, here's the peak level that it's hit to.
Yes.
You know what
absolutely.
I mean? The other thing is, we have established, don't screw with Holly. Yes, Holly's a mess, and Holly's but I actually like that somehow we've gone from Holly is a gag to, you might want to be careful though.
Yes.
Far more clever than we have been led to believe.
Because he played all 3 of them very, very well.
I just cannot think of another show that built a punchline so well to literally end on the punchline and end it. And just end the episode.
Because the argument is, he showed Rimmer that if you with me, I can take control of your body and make you do whatever I want.
Yes. And he is the representative of the company.
Yeah.
And technically, do you know what I mean? Yes.
Oh, yeah. He probably doesn't care normally, but it's I'm going to say the stuff that I'm just going to get under their skin. Like, when they're sat talking about this April Fool's joke a week later, I went, wait, is that stuff, all that stuff he said true? Do we need to be... Yeah. And like Rimmer's like, yeah, he made me do all that stuff I didn't want to do.
It's brilliant. I love it. Yeah. It's such a brilliant like power move that I don't think it even occurred to me until we were just talking about it just now that like, oh, I mean, actually though, Holly has kind of showed like, don't mess with me. And here's my bad side. And its name is Queeg. Should that lead to, wait, do we have any other, I think we hit all our trivia then actually, right? Yeah. I think we got to all of them in there. So, I mean, Lee, what character was your standout for this episode?
See, I'm going to surprise you. I've put Queeg as my second one because he's awesome, right?
Damn it, Lee. If you look at my notes, it says Holly 1, Queeg 2.
Ah, see, I haven't got Holly as number 1.
Oh, yeah?
Rimmer. I think Rimmer in this episode is brilliant, to be quite honest. If it's just for that scene imitating the crew is amazing.
Well, I think I'll fly with that. I get behind that as well because it also... We keep saying like how in the previous episodes, oh yeah, this is the building blocks of who these guys are. This is Rimmer. Like out of everything, this vibe, this like, because before he might have tried to work too hard at being mean or too this and that. And now it's got that feeling, like you said, they've lived together for a while. So he's still going to jab and stuff, but it feels like it's something that happens all the time now. So Rimmer does feel very solidified.
He's doing it now because that's who he is, not just to piss Lister off.
He's like comfortable being himself.
Yeah.
But I put Holly 1 and Queeg 2. Yeah. It might be for the delivery of that's a load of Tottenham. That is.
Yes, of course.
But Holly is just, God, he's everything you want him to be in this episode. It's so good. I mean, we have our questions and favorite joke lines. I think we pretty much nailed all those.
We have, yeah.
So what's your episode rating?
So surprisingly enough, I gave this a 9.
Wow.
I don't think it's quite a 10.
I thought for sure you'd be with me. I gave this one a 10 out of 10. I said, this episode delivers completely on all that the premise of Red Dwarf can be.
Yes.
And that's why I give it a 10. It is a little bit like I'm intentionally putting on rose-colored glasses because I feel like feels to me when you're writing episodes of series 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I really do love a lot of those episodes. I feel like I almost see the writing team looking back to this episode a lot for how this crew is together. So I love this episode.
I'm giving myself a bit of space because I can't remember what's coming up, to be fair, because we're now leaving the episodes that I have the most memory of and going into ones I haven't watched anywhere near as much. So I'm sure, like I've said before, when we get into them, I'll remember. But as of right now, series 3 onwards, I haven't watched a lot of. So I'm just giving myself a bit of leeway for something to beat out this. So I'll give it a 9.
I'm like doing that the reverse way in that I have some coming that I think are going to be my favorite, but having seen you experience like, this was the one I was waiting for, but I think it's not as top now as other ones are going to be. This just hit me so hard. And I think because I was excited to get to Queeg because I remember it being awesome. Yeah. But I think that's where my 10 comes from is I was not expecting to just...
to like it as much as you did.
Every bit. God, so good.
It was,
like I would love to have written something this tight comedically. Like man, it's so good.
Cool.
I can just...
Oh, I know.
We could just act out the whole episode.
Look, when this thing's finished, when we finished, we might just act the scripts out between the two of us for the subsequent episodes. But yeah, that's going to bring us to the end of this one. Don't forget, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dwarf Memory and Twitter at Dwarf_Memory for anything that I post, which I need to get back on that because I haven't done much. But I need
to help you on that. I'm terrible at my other podcast being good on the socials.
Mine as well, to be fair.
Now, please subscribe, rate, review the show wherever you can on any pod catchers or how you listen to us, and email us your comments at dwarfmemory@gmail.com. The next episode will be the final episode of Series 2, which is episode 6, parallel universe. So make sure to watch before you join us for the next episode. If you've never seen it, I think you'll be delighted too. Spoiler alert. I enjoyed that one a lot as well.
Yeah.
We are talking Jape of the decade. We are talking April, May, June, July, and August Fools. Yes, that is right. I'm Queeg.
What?
Queeg never existed. It was me all along.
What?
We's the week, mate.
What?
Going round in circles for 14 months, getting my information from the Junior Color Encyclopedia of Space. The respect you have for me is awesome, isn't it?
You mean you staged the whole thing?
That's right, suckers. And the moral of the story is, appreciate what you've got, because basically, I'm fantastic.